Next, you have Dr. Jacob Hakoy and Tink. After Dr. Tink, we'll take a break from Mincha, and then we'll get to brushing teeth on Shabbos. This idea of Jacob talking about Peyot, because I asked him to speak at the Kinus Torah, and he told me he wasn't sure, like, what should I be talking about? And like 20 minutes later, he shows me the pasuk about Peyot, and there's a little illustration in the Chumash about where Peyot are, where the Peyot are. And he asked me, well, how come some people have longer ones? I said, I don't know. Go find out and talk about it. So Jacob, please.
You like my haircut? All right, it's very ironic that here I am standing in front of you talking about Peyot, and Rabbi Levi is going to be talking about brushing teeth. I mean, where is this coming from? All right. Good. I'm leaving. That's it. All right. That was good. Okay. I can't talk. That's it. Stop. All right. Firstly, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to Rabbi Levi for laboring with me for the last few weeks over this subject matter, who made not only this evening possible, but as well made any understanding that I have of this subject possible. His infectious enthusiasm and guidance not only made the learning meaningful, but he made it fun. So thank you. Contrary to popular belief, side locks are payas. Leaving them longer is not just a Hasidic thing, it's a Jewish thing. The Torah states in Kedoshim, which is chapter 19, verse 27, Lo yisakifu pe'as roishchem velo yisachshish es pe'as zikonecho. Or in other words, Lo takifu pe'at roishchem velo tashchit et pe'at zikonecho. The Good Chumash renders it as follows. The direct translation here is, you shall not round off the growth at the corners of your head or destroy the growth at the corners of your beard. So in other words, don't round off the corners of your head. That's the first part. The Good Chumash says, you should not remove the hair from around the circumference of your head, making the hair behind the ears level with the hair of the temples. And the second part of the pasuk is, you should not destroy the extremities of your beard. We're not going to be talking about the beard. That's another subject matter altogether. We're going to focus only on the first part of the verse relating to Peyos. It's another translation from the Chumash that we have in the shul. You must not round off the hair of your head, thereby making the border of your hair an even circle by removing the hair that covers the corner of your head in front of the ears. In other words, the temples. You must not destroy any edge of the 5 edges of your beard, as we said, the chin, the 2 cheeks, and the 2 temples. The prohibition, as you might have deduced, applies only to males. And the source for that is Kedushin. There's a whole Talmud there if you're interested. Page 29a, where it discusses male and female obligations. You might be wondering what the reason for this is. Why do men have to follow this ruling? So the reason for the prohibition, like many laws in the Torah, the verse itself does not spell out the exact reason for this prohibition. However, some commentaries explain that since the mitzvah is placed among other prohibitions related to idolatry, in other words, idol worship, and since many idol worshippers used to cut off the hair at the sides of their heads while leaving the hair on the top to grow, it is incumbent upon us as Jews to maintain an appearance that distinguishes us from idol worshippers.
So the monks.
Correct. very, very much so, the saint. And we won't go into that. This is from the Mishnah Torah. This is the Rambam. That's what he says. Others, like the Tur, was a very big codifier. He sees this prohibition of shaving off the sideburns in the category of what we call chukim, which are decrees. In other words, the reason for this mitzvah is not necessarily explainable or revealed to us. And many chukim that we've discussed in the past in the shul, people are aware of that. Correct? Having said that, this is a background or an introduction. Let's see how we can distill the first half of the verse related to Peyot, which says, you shall not round off the growth at the corners of your head. That's what we're focusing on. So I've just kind of placed it into some categories so we can have an understanding of what's going on. First category, location. Where are we talking about? Where and what is the place that we are dealing with? It says round off the corners of your head. What does that mean? Where is that? Number two, what's the minimum, the halachic minimum of the length for what we can cut? How can we cut? This way, that way, long, short. Get into that. Number three, the method with which to cut. What can you cut with? Can I use my nails? Can I use a knife? Can I use whatever? Right? Okay. And number four, which is a very interesting category, is the various practices regarding that length. How different communities actually observe these laws. So focus on item number one, category number one, location. The Mishnah Talmud teaches us, the Mishnah in Talmud teaches us in Makot 20b. So I'm going to go to Makot 20b and I'm going to tell you what it says. Makot 20b. Before I discuss Makot 20b, just interesting to note that Makot or Makos is the part of the Talmud that discusses lashes. That's what Makot means, right? So why is Peyos in this section? You would think it would mean section Peyos or something like that. Well, it's interesting to note that these instructions are given in Makos, which means lashes, since the punishment for these violations is lashes. You violate, lashes. So you're liable, if any of these prohibitions are transgressed, you're liable for lashes. So that's why, in theory, thank you, Rabbi. I'm just saying, we're talking Talmudic text, right? So, all right, that's what the whole, so that's why it's there. Just to give you an indication of why it's there, not somewhere else. Here's the teaching in Makos 20b. It teaches, the Mishnah says, and one who rounds the edge of his head is flogged. The sages taught that the edge of his head, we're talking location now, we keep in mind, right? First category. The edge of his head is the extremity of his head. What does that mean? What is the extremity of his head? This is a reference to one who levels the hairline of his temples, of the hairline behind his ear, and to the hairline of his forehead. So you're making this kind of leveling. That's what the prohibition is. There is no hair behind the ears or the forehead. So we don't want an area with no hair. Clear? So one who removes the hair from the temple so that they are like those areas violates the prohibition against rounding the edges of his head. Clear? Sort of? Yeah? Okay.
Getting rid of the hair between the back of the ear and the forehead.
Forehead and the back of the ear. Leveling.
You said you don't want
Don't want to put no hair.
you don't want a place.
We don't want to have an area with no hair in between. Because if we do that,
What?
between the forehead and the back of the ear, this area here. Temples. Yes? No? That's basically it. Making a line, leveling. Yeah, leveling. So there's different areas that we're going to discuss how far we can cut. Keep on going. Good. All right. Right. So in simple language, let's try to make it simple. Do not level, or as another with the Mishnah, round the edge from the forehead to behind the ears. There is no hair in these two places. So we don't want that to occur. That's fair? Okay,
The location is between the two.
that's right. Clear? Okay. And 21b, Rav Shesser says, when teaching the Gemara of this location of the headspace here, he taught the Mishnah. He said he would gesture towards his temple, which is the point between the two parts of the head, the front and the back. And surrounding the edges of his head, one is liable to receive two sets of lashes, one from here for one ear, the hair adjacent to one ear, and from there, the hair adjacent to the other ear. All right? No good? Yeah? It's okay? All right. Okay. Now here's where it gets interesting. Rashi, in commenting on this Gemara, says, if he levels and removes all the hair of his temples, implying that he specifically, when he removes all of that hair in that area, it's forbidden. But removing some of the hair in that area is permissible. So if he removes all of it, he's liable. If he removes some of the hair, it's okay. So when Rashi describes the location of the peyos, he is referring to the width, right? Rambam says the following in the laws of Avodah Zarah, which is idol worship 12:6. I'll refer to that in a second, once I get to it. Here we are. Rambam says that for the corner of his head, which must be left at the temples, the scholars designated no particular size, but we did hear from our elders that one should not be less than 40 hairs. Some say 4, depending on the version that is read, but let's say 40. So he's saying, as long as if you cut more than 40 hairs, you're liable.
Anything down to 40.
Anything 240 hairs. So Rashi
At least 40.
has to leave at least 40 hairs. Right? Okay. Now we see a clear dispute between Rashi and Rambam as to how much of that location has to be removed in order to be liable. So Rashi says, you remove all the hair and you're liable. Rambam says you cannot leave less than 40 hairs. If you leave less than 40, you're liable for lashes. So therefore, Rashi, if you haven't leveled, you're okay. And Rambam, if you leave less than 40, you have lashes. So, yes,
30 hairs.
if you left 30 hairs, all right.
If you left 30 hairs between the back of your ear and your forehead, explain that.
Yes, go ahead.
Explain the dispute.
So, sorry?
Use the example of 30 hairs. Explain how it's a dispute between Rambam and Rashi.
It's a dispute.
Use the example of 30 hairs.
Yes. If you leave 30 hairs, pardon?
Between the empty space in the back of the ear and the
Right.
forehead, that's what it said,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
If you left 30 hairs, then according to Rambam, explain.
So sorry?
If you left 30 hairs
Yes.
between here and here, what would be the dispute?
If you left 30 hairs, then you'd be liable.
According to
Rambam.
Rashi,
You wouldn't be. Okay.
explain that.
Okay. It's clear? It's sort of clear? All right. So now, the reconciliation. The Beis Yosef says, we might be able to say the following. We must nonetheless push the reading of Rashi, which means that if the hair grows on that surface, that's if he cuts from growing up, it is not considered leveling until the temple to the back of the ear and the forehead, unless he removes all the hair all the way to the top of the root of the hairs that grow from the temple. In this understanding, yes? removing even some of the hair which grows in that area, it is forbidden even for the hairs to let grow. Sort of clear?
So just summarize the three different versions: Rambam, Rashi, and the other version of Rashi. Just explain clearly.
I'm going to try.
Just the three different views.
Okay. One view, Rashi says that if you cut all the hair completely, you're liable.
Which means if you left 5 hairs.
If you left 5, it's not a problem. Rambam says if you cut up to 40,
If you left
if
anything
you left anything
less than 40.
less than 40 hairs, you would be liable.
Which means if I left 5,
If I left 5,
I am liable.
I am liable.
Beis Yosef says,
Beis Yosef says that if you cut from going up this way, as long as you didn't cut all the way up here, you're okay.
so if I took 2 hairs and
Yeah.
cut them up at the top, then I'm liable or not?
Cut 2 hairs, you'd be liable.
Liable. So even 2 hairs at the top would be liable.
Correct. All right.
We're going to get that in a second.
Get there soon. I know this is confusing, but I just wanted to get through that. Very clear. Excellent. We're now past this point, and we're going to be talking about the minimum amount of hair that you can actually length. We've got the location, right? We know where we are. Good. Now length. In Nida 52b, the Mishnah defines the halacha regarding what is permitted as length. The 2 hairs spoken of in regard to the red heifer and in regard to leprosy, as well as those spoken of anywhere else, must be long enough for their tips to be bent on their roots. In other words, no less than 1.6 centimeters or 0.6 inches. That's as long as you're allowed to leave it. Less than that, you'd be liable. So this is from Beit Chadash Even Ezer, 155.7. 0.6 of an inch or 1.6 centimeters. So now we know how long the hair, less than this, would be liable. Anything longer is okay. Clear? Good. Just want to make sure we follow. So now we know that in this whole area that we talked about the location, we cannot have any hair shorter that cannot be bent back on itself so that it touches the skin where it grows. Yes?
Clear.
Excellent. All right. Good. Chapter 3. Method of hair removal. How can we do this? So on 21a, Marcus 21a, yes.
That's universal halacha.
Universal halacha in Nida.
Yes.
We didn't discuss how, but just length. Good. Good. Now, how? Method of hair removal. The Mishnah teaches in 21a, this is regarding the beard, so it's not specifically yet the temples. It says one is liable for marring the edges of his beard only if he removes the hair with a razor. In other words, marring equals razor. Good? Okay. I'm going to quote a Rambam now. In Avodah Zarah, which is right here. Destroying, marring, destroying. That's the verse, but that's the quote. Right. For this corner of the head, which must be left at the temples, the scholars designated no particular size. What we did here, from our elders that one should not leave, I said that already. Avodah Zarah 12, yeah, pardon, second half. Right. It is permitted, however, to clip the corners with a pair of scissors, for the prohibition commandment applies only against destroying it with a razor. So that's the commandment from Rambam. Good? Completely leveling with,
The Rambam
right.
is okay.
All right. So, yes, is that clear, sort of? Good. The Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, he says, he is not liable unless he removes the hair with a razor. This refers to the corners of the beard, but not the corners of the head, which do not require a razor to be liable. This is implied by the Gemara, which states, what is the end of the head? One who levels the forehead to the back of the ear, and it does not explain that would require destruction to be liable, as it does with regard to removing the beard. Rather, any leveling is enough to be liable. All right. So how do we resolve
Dispute Russian Rambam.
the Russian, right? How do we resolve some of these issues?
There's a dispute. One said, go ahead, just articulate the dispute that he's read.
Yes. Well, the dispute is with the numbers of hairs, you mean?
No, between razor versus scissor.
The razor versus scissor. The razor is a destruction, and the scissors are not destruction.
So what's the dispute between Rambam and Rosh? What's the like this? The Rambam says that you have to do it with, just articulate.
Yes.
Articulate. The Rambam says in order to be liable, you have to use a,
In order to be liable, you have to use a razor.
just according to the Rambam, if I had long paste like this, and I took
Yeah.
a razor down
If
here.
you took a razor and you would cut it, you would be
Even if I took it all the
liable.
way up to here, if I cut it
Correct.
down there, I'd be liable.
Correct. As long as you use a razor on any length whatsoever, you'd be liable.
According to the
Right.
Rosh, however,
As a rush, it's only with a razor,
it's anything, but as
anything.
long as it comes all the way to the edge.
As long, correct. Yes? Okay. So how do we resolve it? The Shulchan Aruch resolves it like this. So he says, this is, Shulchan Aruch is Caro, Joseph Caro. He says, one is not liable unless they remove the hair with a razor, which is the Rambam's view. Others maintain that removing the hair using scissors as one would a razor, completely removing the hair, thus leveling the corner, is also liable. It is appropriate to be stringent according to this latter view as well. Right? So, razors prohibited, scissors are okay. So when we say scissors, it doesn't necessarily mean only these scissors. There's a shaver that allows you to use because it goes back and forth.
But so long as it's not
As long as it's not
all the way to the edge.
all the way to the end.
And scrape the skin,
No scraping the skin.
lifts and cuts.
Correct.
But the Rambam would say, the Rosh would, sorry, the Rambam would say, if you use scissors all the way to the edge, you're not liable. But we're taking
Right.
the stringency of the Rosh and saying that if you're going to the edge, even if it's scissors, it's also prohibited.
Right. Yes? Okay. So we've discussed 3 categories so far. Sort of, okay? All right. Now we have a very interesting category, which is the various practices regarding the length. What do people do? So, Marcos 20a, which is right over here. Find it. Okay. Sorry, folks. Marcus 20a, right there, Marcus 20a. Good, yes, 5 minutes. Practice number 1, Rashi in the verses of Marcus 28 says the following. There are 5 corners to the beard. This is practice number 1. One is below the ear at the place where the lower cheek goes out and separates, and this is called the corner of the edge of the cheek, which protrudes outward, which is where the beard starts. Anything above that, till the temple, is part of the payas. That's practice number 1. Beis Yosef. in 181.13, 181.1, and 181.9, says the following. It would seem, considering that there is a doubt regarding the biblical injunction, one ought to be stringent and refrain from shaving the temples corresponding to the forehead until below the ear at the place where the lower cheek goes out and protrudes. On the entire surface of this width, one should not put a hand to it with a razor or removing the hair with scissors in manner like a razor. In other words, removing it right to the root. Correct. Another Shulchan Aruch is the corners of the head are the two ends of the head, namely the places where it connects the cheek, one right and one left. And the last of practice number 1 is the measure of the Peyot from the temples corresponding to the forehead until below the ear at the place where the lower cheek goes out and protrudes. On the entire surface of this width, one should not put a hand to it. Practice number 2,
This is it's a
halachic restringency.
It's a stringency.
Correct.
But
Correct.
The minimum you said before is to
Right.
bend the hair back to its root.
Right.
But stringency because of Rashi.
Correct. Practice number 2. The rabbi of Belz said the following. His name was Rabbi Sholem Dov of Belz, first Belzer Rebbe. This is another practice. I've also heard in the name of the Holy Rebbe Sholem Ber of Belz, of blessed memory, that he was once asked why it is extremely stringent to never cut his payos at all. And he responded, based on the words of our sages, a parable to what this is compared to, one who says, "Why is your beard grown?" To which he responds, "Against those who destroy," which Rashi interpreted to be a rhetorical question, since those asking about the beard were remarking on its beauty. He decided to join those who shave to spite those who complimented him. Thus, Rashi translates against, beneged, as in to be part of or join. But the Rashba interpreted this to be a statement. In other words, explaining why he has a beautiful beard, he states that he does it to irritate and spite those who shave. And thus, the word against here means opposite. That is to say, we have no rationale for this. It is simply that we need to be in opposition to those who destroy. This was said by the Belzer Rebbe in reference to the payos of the head, and the words of the wise one's mouth are graceful. Another very beautiful passage from... No, but he talked about, but he is talking about the payos as well. He used the payos, exactly. The Ben Ish Hai, who is a Sephardi fellow, we all know, in the sermon is Zachor, just before Purim, he's referring to when Mordechai was approached by Haman, and how did he know he was a Jew? Specifically because he had his payos. So beautiful sermon here, which I'll quote, and he says the following. This is practice number 2, leaving the payos longer, right? Never cutting them. See how precious the payot are, that they serve as witnesses and a sign of Judaism. The sign that he was referring to was when Haman approached Mordechai. Therefore, how great is the need for you to be careful with these 2 trusted witnesses, who stand one to the right and one to the left, and who crown you with the crown of Judaism. I would not burden you by demanding that you make for yourselves long and thick payos, like our Ashkenazi brethren do. I only ask that they should have a measure that is noticeable to the eyes of all that would see it, and that they should not be treated like grass that are cut close to the surface of the earth, where only a remnant is viable. For these would be invalid as witnesses, as is the law of a minor who is an invalid witness, for only an adult who is fully grown may testify. I have already spoken of this many times, and lucky is a speaker who has listening ears, and praiseworthy are Jews who listen and take heed, and may blessings be upon you. That was practice number 2. Practice number 3. Almost done, folks. Practice number 3. This Chaim Vital quotes his teacher, the Arizal, and it says the following. Now, with respect to the measure of the Peyot, my teacher, the Arizal of blessed memory, was particular to leave all the hairs that are on the temple, which is all the hair that is there at the ear between the two places that have no hair, as we discussed, and on either side of the head, as is stated in Beis Yosef. And the height of the Peyos is to the point that when you raise up your ear, the point where the top of the ear can reach above is called the corner to its height. And even if the hairs were big and long, he would not cut them with scissors, only to the point that they got long and hung and went down to the border of the hairs of the beard, which is here. Then he would cut them and shorten them with scissors, because that which extends down and below that point is no longer called the corner of the head. Different view, right? Now, in a letter, this is from Igeres HaKodesh, which is volume 20, letter number, believe it or not, 7,455 on page 10. The Rebbe would answered Rabbi Yales, who was the chief rabbi of Philadelphia, because he had a question of Peyos too. So he said the following: with respect to the question or comment, the custom you mentioned, in other words, to never touch the Peyos of the head at all, I have not found that to be the Chabad custom, and the contrary is true. One might say a few reasons for this, and perhaps included is the reason you allude to in your letter, namely, not to mix, meaning not to mix the hair of the payas area and the beard. And this is something that requires explanation, is not to mix the divine lights of the two tikkunim, of the 13 holy male tikkunim. We'll need someone to explain that. I can't. But in other words, not to mix. Yeah. At any rate, it is stated explicitly that the Arizal would cut and shorten them with his scissors. Based on the above, it is understood that the great question is to the contrary on those who do not touch their payat at all, which is in direct opposition to the actions of the Arizal. So we have three very distinct practices of how to deal with the length. In conclusion, so to recap, we've discussed payos in terms of 4 categories. The location, no leveling between the front of the head, the forehead, and the back of the ears, in simple terms. 2, the halachic stringencies in terms of length. He said no less than 1.6 centimeters. The method of hair removal: razor, forget it. Scissors, okay. 4, the various practices regarding the length, which are all very validated, given our discussion. Just a little note, says with all due respect to everybody, the Chabad custom of not leaving it longer is not a leniency, but it's something that the Arizal did, and as a result of that, this is our custom. Thank you very, very much for it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacob Hakoyen. We'll take a break from MENACHEM. We'll talk about brushing teeth shortly.